Hello everyone, my name is Josh, and this swim's called Interesting Musings, or WHIMS, and I just finished watching the episode of Inside Number 9, Bernie Clifton's dressing room, and that's the episode that I'm going to be talking with you about today. This episode is a very interesting one because unlike its previous episode, well, pretty much in keeping with its last episode, Zanzibar, it's a much more lighter affair than most Inside Number 9 episodes. But this one is just between the two main writers, Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith. They play Tommy Drake and Len Shelby, who are these old comedy partners. They haven't seen each other for 30 years. But there's a reason why they're now currently doing this old final show that they're going to do before they part ways once and for all. But their last big performance was at the London Pavilion. But sadly, something happened that really kind of doesn't really get explained. It's hinted at a lot throughout the course of the episode, what potentially could have happened. But as it starts to go on, as it goes on, you begin to get little pieces here and there. The real clincher for me, what made this episode really great, is what happens on repeat viewings. Because on repeat viewings, you kind of view the reactions of Reece Shearsmith's character of Tommy in a very kind of autonomous, as he likes to be called, in the episode. He has this reaction that is kind of like, oh, late again, aren't you? Like, typical, you can never, be on time kind of reaction. But then you look at his face, his expression in that one moment when Len first arrives is one of those moments where I kind of found myself thinking, okay, this is clearly, someone who's used to seeing this kind of timekeeping or this kind of punctuality with Len. Like, you can clearly tell that when he talks to Len, there's something about him that really just kind of feels like he knows everything that he's going to do. He knows that he's always going to bounce back a serious question with a joke or some kind of, double entendre that he can always, look at with his, Miranda type glare to the audience or glare to the camera or whatever, wherever he happens to be looking. But what's really wonderful about this particular episode is you can tell by the way Len behaves, there's something a bit off about the way he carries himself. But it's mostly articulated in the way the two men look, because as first of all, you're kind of thinking to yourself, okay, Thomas is there at the very beginning of the episode setting up these props, and you think they're going to do this church hall to a very small audience in the church hall. But then, as the series goes on, you realise that, oh, he's setting it up because he wants to get a flavour for something, like he wants to capture something that was once lost. So maybe that's the case. But then they start talking about various sketches, such as the sketch where it's an interview and this guy comes in and he tries to, get this job interview, and he starts to compliment the interviewer and say, the interviewer goes, oh, well, my name is Mr. Kirk, and I'll be conducting this interview today. And he goes, oh, it's Mr. Kirky, you're from Scotland, is that there, my wee Jiminy, and things like that. And he constantly throws these impressions, and he goes, oh, we can't do that, that's too dated, people are going to think it's racist. And he goes, oh, how can that be? I mean, it's just a joke. I mean, it's just basically something that invites the audience to laugh. And he goes, well, what are you really inviting the audience to laugh at, really? Other than, aren't other cultures somewhat funny or whatever? But yeah, that's kind of thing. It is, it's just a guy doing silly voices. And he goes, well, that's not right. People have moved on now. Like, you can't make fun of... you can't make fun of anybody unless, of course, you're of a certain culture. You can't make fun of a certain culture unless you're of that culture yourself. Like, that's the whole entire point of it. And he goes, oh, that's not true. What about gimme, gimme, gimme? And he goes, exact point. That they're a part of that culture that they're, mocking. So it makes perfect sense. Or they're paying loving tribute to. But I think it's very interesting in just the character dynamics, because very quickly in the episode... you get the side of it where they always start to, they either do a rehearsal for a sketch, or they talk about life. Like, say, for example, there's a scene where he goes, I do a job in computing now, and it's called digital marketing management, or retail marketing, or something like that. And he goes, "Oh, that's very interesting." And he goes, "Oh, or our clips go up on YouTube. Remember the guys who wanted to make it on DVD?" And he goes, "Oh, well, I have picked someone to pay that I pay to get rid of those clips." And he goes, "No, why'd you do that for?" And he goes, "Because I have to. They're an embarrassment to me. Like, I can't be going into my HSBC meeting and have someone say, 'Oh, aren't you that guy dressed up at like Tina Turner with those, with those moped locks and plastic balls for eyes kind of thing.'" And he goes, "They're an embarrassment to me, those old clips." And the way he framed that question on the first time round, you think it's a very weird thing to say. Like, oh, it's obvious he's kind of outgrown his goofy comedy roots. It's kind of like when Jeff Daniels was in Dumb and Dumber, and he did, and after Dumb and Dumber, he had a bit of about a 10-year gap, and then he made stuff like The Newsroom, Arachnophobia, and all these other great dramas where he gave these very good performances, and then he went back to, playing Harry in Dumb and Dumber. It just kind of feels like, oh, he's probably outgrown that stuff by now, like he's more interested in doing serious stuff. But then you hear that question again on a second viewing, and it adds a completely different context. And then when Len shuffles off on a tangent, he goes, "Oh, do you fancy a tea?" And he goes, "Oh, fine. Is there any Earl Grey or is there any peppermint?" And he goes, "No, I don't think so." And he goes, "Oh, well, just stick to Builder's tea." And I even said at that moment, like, "What's wrong with Builder's tea, Tommy? Like, what's wrong with Builder's tea?" I make Builder's tea whenever I go into the whenever I go into the kitchen to make a cup of tea. It's a British classic, Tommy. Like, honestly, me and Len would have been two peas in a pod. We'd always constantly, minimise issues and things like that. But yeah, I think that's one of the things that I really like about it, because it really tells you a lot about Len as a character and where Len's head would be if he was to have that conversation with him in real life. And this episode is fantastic for that, because it shows how well he knows Len. He knows Len. He knows that he practically has a one-man comedy army when it comes to him. Before he does this little thing where they have this little disagreement, and he just does this little bit where he puts his hand through the sleeve of a trench coat, and he basically, is caressing his own leg, and he's pretending that he's looking off elsewhere, distracted, all this other stuff. And he does this, these kind of, silent movie type gestures, these very silent mime type bits, and he just sees in those moments the memories and all the good times that he had with this guy, and how he practically could carry the show on his own and all those other things. But then this tea making scene is when he starts to reference Len's daughter Leanne, and he starts to say things like, "Oh, she asked me to come down here because she said that you were," and he goes, "Wait, what did she say?" And he goes, "It doesn't matter, it's fine." And he goes, "Oh, I want to know what she said." And he just goes that you wanted to do this gig. And he would always say this gig as if they're actually doing a show, like a small show for a small audience, like a family group or something like that, or a retirement home kind of thing, like, those sorts of places where they do, or kind of like a Pontins or a Haven type, event where they kind of, do these variety acts and things like that. It gives you the impression that they're doing something like that. But then when he says the word gig, it's kind of with a certain sense of he's hiding something else. And during the tea making scene, this is the first time we see the alcohol come out. And I noticed on my first viewing, I watched this episode twice. On my first viewing, you notice very quickly that Len starts to change in behaviour when he drinks. Like he starts to become this character who really does feel the pressure of what he's doing. And of course, as the episode goes on, you see there's a close-up of his eyes where he looks very kind of bloodshot, and he has kind of like shadows or circles, dark circles under his eyes, like he's been sleeping rough, or he's kind of been overindulging in the drink too much. And then he there's this bit where they're doing a puppet sketch or sort of dummy sketch, and when it's finished, he goes, "Oh, I'm just going to go out for a ciggy. Do you want to come with me?" And he goes, "Oh, I gave up 10 years ago, you should too. And he goes out, and then that's when he's looking through his stuff, and then he sees the bag, the plastic bag full of, toilet roll, razor, and, all these other things, and he realises that he's been sleeping homeless. And that was really heartbreaking to watch. See him slowly start to unravel these things, because it makes you think to yourself, all the stuff that we're seeing is happening inside Tommy's head. But what's very interesting is you don't see him process those things in real time. You're just it gives you the impression that, I want to go into it very much, but then of course I have to reveal the twist. And for those of you who haven't seen this episode, I recommend getting yourself on iPlayer and looking up Inside Number 9. It's completely free to do, and if you get an iPlayer account, you can watch all these episodes wholesale without any real, payments or anything like that. It's completely free of charge. Get an iPlayer account and watch these episodes, especially Bernie Clifton's dressing room, because I feel like this episode really needs to be seen by people. And I think this episode will be a good episode to introduce people to Inside Number 9, because it really shows the talent that Shearsmith and Pemberton are able to achieve on such a small scale in such a light-hearted way. But what I think is very important is that you notice that he looks much rougher, he looks much more ragged, and much more, he looks like he's been sleeping rough, even when he walks in at the very start of the episode. And you can really tell that he's filling in the gaps, given the stuff that he's learned through what... So first, very quickly, before I go off into the tangent and actually explain the twist by accident, I want to say, for those of you who haven't seen the episode, pause this video or leave this video altogether. Watch the episode, get an iPlayer account, watch the episode. It's the second episode of Series 4. Watch it, and then come back and watch this episode, and then we can talk about the twist. But for those of us, I'll give you guys a moment who haven't seen the episode to stop the video, go and watch it on iPlayer, and then come back. But for those of you who have seen the episode and know the twist, it gives me the impression that the majority of this episode is going on inside Tommy's head. But what's very interesting is that Leanne is coming in throughout his speech, and she's given him stuff to look over, which is his old props and things like that. And she slipped in these little bits like his homeless gear and things like that, and all the things that he's been doing in secret that he hasn't told him, and he's just kind of processing it through a sort of like monologue in his head. But except in his head, he's having this two-way conversation with Len through these sketches, through these little bits of nostalgia. And I think it's very interesting, because you can see in his eyes that he clearly isn't someone... He looks like he has dark circles under his eyes, or there's a little bit of a red dilation to his pupils if you look very closely at his eyes when he's having the real intense conversations, or when he's having these close-up looks of Steve Pemberton's face. You can really tell that the makeup really did a good job of giving away subtle hints of what's going on. But I like the fact that there is a coffee and a tea machine in the room, but there's no one, it's not actually switched on, so you actually really do get the impression that he's made it himself, and it's just slowly been brewing in the background all the time as they've been talking. And it really gives you this impression that there's little things that you notice in the background that really kind of give you the hint that this is a twist. But they don't obviously telegraph it, but you have to look at it very carefully, and that's a very good idea. I think that him being homeless is one of the things that really was quite devastating to me, because I feel like he's one of those people who clearly, wants to go into show business. He enjoys it so much, but then you realise that as soon as the bourbon comes out, this entire dark shroud begins to emerge, this new brand of cynicism. It's not just simply him talking about, this sketch is dated, or you can't have this punchline because it's too racist or it's too racy. You've got to kind of, be serious. When the bourbon comes out, his entire tone changes. He has a little bit more of a sarcastic and a little bit more of a cynical approach to how he talks to Len. And I think Len does a very good job of kind of trying to be his more buoyant self, where he's trying to, be optimistic, even though he's kind of, saying that, oh, fair enough, you're right, you you probably are right. Either way, it works. Like when he says Drake and Shelby, da 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 da, kind of. And he's trying to be optimistic, but you can clearly tell that he just wants to, do this because he's just so happy to be in the same room with his old friend. But then you realise he keeps bringing up, remember what happened in Bernie Clifton's dressing room? And he goes, yeah, I don't remember. And he goes, that's a surprise that you don't remember. Like, you really don't remember what happened in Bernie Clifton's dressing room. And it all comes together when it's the brown bottles, 10 brown bottles sketch. And I really do like it because it really shows that there is humour in these guys. Like, there were moments in this episode where I genuinely laughed because it really did take me back to when my parents first showed me Laurel and Hardy when I was a kid, and I loved how I love slapstick humour in general, but the type of humour that they do really kind of is this wonderful window into comedy because you really do. It's the type of humour that really applies to both adults and children. Like, adults can watch it and enjoy it for what it is or its own level, but then children can watch it and have their own version of what's going on and actually see it in a different point of view, or actually have their minds expand by watching this type of comedy. And it really is well done, and I really like how Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith were able to channel that in their performances. But Shearsmith is definitely playing his card very straight, but he knows he has comedy roots there, and you can really tell that he really just wants to get the truth out of Len if he was there in the room, because it's later revealed that he's not at this particular church hall to rehearse for this show at this, to a certain audience where it's like, we're doing this at, a show hall, or we're doing this at, a retirement home or a children's party or anywhere else, a holiday park. This is actually, his wake or his funeral. And that was very heartbreaking. That was a very heartbreaking moment to watch. When Leanne comes in, she goes, "Are you all right?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm just going over my speech." That was really sad. I felt like, him, because you can see in his face, you can clearly tell when you watch this episode for the second time, it's much more rewarding because you feel like you get so many details that really not necessarily telegraph the twist, but they really do kind of add further context to what's really going on inside the character's head and how he's reprocessing it, because he isn't actually talking to anyone in the room. He's using the props that Leanne has brought in for these things, and he's found things within these props as he's going down memory lane to his early showbiz days. He's seeing all these little dark ink blotches throughout his looking at these nostalgic things. And it's like when you're looking at old photos, or when you're looking at old trinkets you used to have when you were a kid, or you're looking at old toys when you was a kid. Like, I remember I had this Action Man doll. I think his name was Professor X, or Professor Extreme, or something like that. He was a very hardcore villain, and there was this toy that I used to have, that I used to play with when I was a kid, where he would have acid burns and his hair would be all kind of like wiry, like a Medusa type head, where there'd be kind of like these long purplish blue type streaks coming out of his head, and he'd have, bandages wrapped around him, and he'd look very ghoulish under the eyes. And I used to love the hell out of this toy as a kid. In fact, there's a photo of me when I was a kid at school, playing with this doll when I was probably about 6 or 7. And I remember I would just look at that, and I actually would get out my old toys every once in a while and look at those things. And that's exactly what Tommy's doing in these moments. He's looking at his old props and connecting memories to these plots. Like, there were times when he probably did go over the dummy sketch and actually trying to figure out how can he approach this conversation with Len in a way where it feels like he's being constructive, but then he's also trying to get to he's trying to remove the veneer of niceties and actually just being quite direct. He's being his old self in the sense he's always been very sarcastic, like, "Oh, I was wondering if you'd turn up," and things like that. But then he's also trying to be very direct as well. Like, he's trying to say, "Why didn't you tell me you were homeless? And why didn't you tell me you were struggling? That I would have helped you if you'd have told me," kind of thing. He's trying to do all these things. But Len just doesn't want to. He wants to do this show, and when he pulls out the alcohol, that's when his mood changes and he begins to get more, angry, or a little bit more cynical, or a little bit more skeptical, or a little bit more, sarcastic in his tone. And that really adds so many layers, because you could clearly tell. It's like when you are in a dream and the actual, dream is trying to hint at you that something's wrong, but or there's constant hints going on in your brain that's telling you that this is a dream, but you don't quite pick it up until you actually wake up that you've actually been dreaming. It's that kind of feel to it. And it is actually very emotional, and I really found myself really enjoying the piece as a whole, and I enjoyed it the second time round, knowing the twist going in. And it's such a rewarding experience, and that's what's so wonderful about Inside Number 9, is you can watch these episodes, and you can watch them twice, and you can still find little details throughout that really add so much to to how the writers approach this particular episode. But let me know what you think. What little details did you pick up on throughout the episode that really enhanced the twist for you, especially if it was a thing that really was quite monumental? Is there anything that I've missed, that I've failed to pick up on in this particular review, that you can probably shed more light on in the comments? I'd love to hear your thoughts about what you thought of this episode, particularly if you've watched this multiple times. What did you guys pick up on multiple viewings, and what were you able to get out of the entire piece as a whole from those little hints and those little gestures? Because I'd really love to know your thoughts. This is a really good episode to discuss in depth, I feel like. And anyway, that's my review for Bernie Clifton's Dressing Room. It's a fantastic episode. I really do think it's fantastic. It's very well written. Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith have wonderful chemistry. It's just such a wonderful love letter to double acts, because we as a nation in Britain really love our double acts, whether they are literally from the 1930s to the 1970s. Even if they're animated cartoons, you really do get this impression that we really do love our double acts, and we love, seeing two people just work off each other in a very good way. And to me, I just think this entire episode is a real emotional journey. And as the episode says, if you're going to cry, cry tears of laughter. And I just think that's what I think we should all do from time to time. We should always, cry tears of laughter eventually, and find the joy in things, where sometimes we can just look at the world and think, what's the point in finding joy when there is no joy to be found? We should just remember, to always see the bright side in things, and to always be happy, and, appreciate the things we do have, and find the joy in small things. And I hope you guys have had a good day, and I hope you like this review. And that's it for me now. I'm Josh, and this has been Whimsical Industry Musings, and take care. Bye-bye for now.